Many prominent economists, including this year's Nobel Prize winner, have insisted that the best way to tackle the current economic crisis is to recapitalize banks by buying shares in their companies and injecting equity directly. Britain was the first to take steps to execute such a plan, and the European countries will be following suit. It seems now that the United States will also be implementing our own bailout plan in a similar fashion. My question to you is this the most effective means of addressing the crisis? Why or why not? And does this set a proper precedent for government intervention in the private sector?
I hope and believe that the step announced, I guess yesterday, with regard to investment in certain banking institutions, I hope that will be a step forward. As you may remember, back when we were dealing with that blank sheet of paper, or that two-page bill that Secretary Paulson handed to us saying, give me the power to address this financial crisis. We said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make certain that the taxpayer is protected, that the homeowners are protected, that the CEOs who profited from running their companies into the ground and being reckless with other people's money, they're not going to get rewarded, no golden parachutes. But what we did also do, and this was in response to certain prominent economist, Paul Krugman, who just got the Nobel Prize, was one. He said there needs to be a diversified set of tactics here that are authorized. And so it was at our insistence, the mainly Democratic members who were working on how to do this package right, that we insisted that this would be an option. It's not going to be just buying up bad paper from various financial institutions. There's also going to be an option of taking a stake in the bank. That has a couple of advantages, no absolute guarantees, but it does have the advantage of putting some capital where it needs to be and encouraging a kind of freeing up of the credit markets. And by the way, this measure that you described came along with a guarantee system for credit. It's one way to directly affect that. It's also a way of protecting the taxpayer, because that gives the taxpayer a certain return, or virtually a certain return on the upside as these institutions come back. So it does have some advantages. But I must say, this is a situation that requires our best efforts, and we're going to have a long slog, I think, to bring this economy back. And the measures that we've taken are a beginning, but they're only a beginning. We need to oversee it carefully and make certain that we're monitoring this every step of the way.
Thank you, Congressman Price. Dr. Lawson, same question to you.
If we're going to get anywhere in this debate, we need to be honest. My opponent voted for the initial plan that was pushed on Congress.
Would the audience please hold their applause until the end?
And in light of that, I find it difficult to understand how is then further serving the public interest to go out and recruit another $150 billion of spending to add on top of the $700 billion revolving credit line to give to the Treasury to fund a plan that initially was specified as buying questionable assets from banks at above market prices. The initial plan that Paulson and Bernanke proposed, the administration proposed, did not talk about directly recapitalizing banks. I do agree with the economists and the model of directly recapitalizing banks and effectively nationalizing our financial system, as distasteful as that sounds, is a methodology that has been used in the past to get through banking crises. It was used in Sweden 10 years ago. The problem we have today is that our overall system of debt-based financing is so far out of equilibrium, the jury is still out as whether this will work. For example, today, headline in the New York Times, Paulson is up there saying, banks, we're giving you a lot of money. Make sure you deploy this capital. Well, let's think about that for a moment. How do banks deploy capital? Do they give it to you? No, you have to take out a loan. Well, part of the reason we got into this mess is because we, the American people, and we, the American government, are already having trouble servicing the debt we have. People are losing their homes. So how is throwing more debt on top of a society that is already drowning in debt, from the borrower's perspective, going to help? So I would politely ask that my opponent remain honest when he's talking about his record on these critical issues.
Congressman Price, 1 minute rebuttal.
I'm not going to be accusing my opponent of dishonesty, but I'm going to say he's mistaken. The two-page bill that Secretary Paulson sent up didn't have very much in the way of specificity at all. But when we rewrote the bill the first time, we put in the provisions I'm talking about. You know that. It was in the first bill, it was in the second bill. And that's the power that's now being used by the Secretary of the Treasury to put some capital into these banks. You know, it's, I would readily agree that the policies of Mr. Lawson's party, where we turned $5 trillion of surplus, projected surpluses, into $3 trillion of additional debt. I mean, who could disagree that that has put our country in a weakened position? But the fact is, there's a danger here, not to Wall Street. I couldn't care less about bailing out Wall Street. I care a lot about Main Street, about the person trying to buy a car, trying to keep their home, trying to make payroll in a small business. We've got to put this fire out. Then we can deal with some of the folks who I'm convinced committed arson.
Dr. Lawson, 1 minute.
It's important to note that those surpluses that Representative Price referred to only existed because we were still spending the Social Security and the Medicaid trust funds to produce those. We've never had a real budget surplus because Congress refuses to live within its means. Now, with respect to the overall bailout legislation, we are in a difficult position, and it's important to know that moving forward, we absolutely need to regulate the heck out of the banks. When you give the banks the ability to have a monopoly over our money, the most important commodity in our entire, in our entire economy, we absolutely need to regulate that. Yet my opponent votes to repeal Glass-Steagall under the Clinton administration, which is an important part of allowing institutions to leverage up and get too big to fail. He also voted for the poorly named bankruptcy, the 2005 Bankruptcy Reform Act that makes it impossible for many consumers to walk away from excessive credit card debt. So I think what we have here is a congressional leadership, frankly in both parties, that's absolutely asleep at the switch and working for the banks.